Bearing in mind you bought your first property in 2008 and we're now 2025, what are some of the biggest changes you think you've seen in the market?
I've been stressed out to the maximum. I've got plenty of residential properties. Getting older as well, I'm thinking, what about my pension? What about the tax savings? So I'm starting to look at...
There's one tenant in particular who's contacted me more in the time they have been a tenant than every other tenant combined. So I got to a point where I just said, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. If I could get rid of one, it would be the HMO model. Bearing in mind you've built a sizable property portfolio, you still self-manage your entire portfolio. Why is it that you put yourself through that, sir? The first time I went to a property networking event was probably around 8-9 years ago. And I remember going there, and I don't want to say the name of the event, but I was probably the youngest person by 10, maybe 15 years, the only person of color there, apart from somebody working on the bar. And it didn't really feel like it was for me. You know, each and every week we have a special guest. And today we've got, you know, Jazz, like you've founded or co-founded the Kent Property Meet, have been running that since 2016. How important do you think networking is in property?
Massively important, Kazy. I just can't estimate the power of networking. You know, I got involved with networking as part of my own education. Self-education, actually, because when I first started property, I bought my first one in 2008. Just a simple single let.
Great timing there.
Post-recession.
It was you was just after then, right?
It was just after the financial crisis in 2008, and I bought my first property for £76,500.
Whereabouts was that?
This is in Medway.
Okay.
And it was just a 2-up, 2-down terraced house in the middle of a row of, you know, on a small street. And the owner before had literally bought that for like £107,000 a year or two before I purchased it. And this was when Rightmove just started launching the purchase prices on their website. And I was shocked. I couldn't understand why somebody had to sell it at such a loss, you know. And I didn't know about these BMV titles, you know, below market value or anything like that. I just went ahead, bought it. YouTube was just coming up, so you know I used to go on there and figure out how to do refurbs, etc., and try to work out how to pull off the skirting boards and doors and carpentry bits and all sorts. So when I bought that, I'd done it up. Took me a bit of time, but I learned everything, learned the whole ropes from the beginning all the way through to the end.
Was that property for yourself, or was it always an investment, that first one?
It was for an investment, because I was from a business background then, but I had a bit of spare cash and I wanted to park it somewhere. I didn't know what else to do at that time. But just going back to the networking point, the reason why I started networking was because I'd read all the books. I did all the I call them low value, but low cost items first. So I read the books about investing, about property and other bits and bobs to sort of educate myself. And then I came across on social media when Facebook and everything else was coming up, this landlord's property meeting locally, you know, and I thought, let me go and see what other people are doing, because I didn't have access to other people. My friends in that circle wasn't interested in business or property or anything like that, because they were 9-to-5 people, and then on the weekends it was Friday night, Saturday night, you know. So because of the networking, I think I've got to where I am through the contacts that I've built up there. So it's very important. And for anyone that doesn't network or watch podcasts like this, which are all self-education, why not, you know?
What is it? Obviously, you get your network. We're very familiar with, like, you know, the kind of taglines of your network. You know, it represents your net worth. But what do you think people can really get out of networking?
So we met through a mutual friend of ours, and I'll tell you what, he benefited only a few weeks ago. He turned up. You know, you get out what you put in. So you don't just go to one networking event and just call it quits. You have to go and build relationships with individuals in that room. the host and the co-host, our job is to make sure that you connect people together, and I'm a connector of people, right? So our friend, can I name him?
Yeah,
or
of
not?
course.
You know, so our friend Omar, he's doing a development down in Kent, and we've got a surveyor in our group. He had one conversation over a technical financial matter, and he saved 20 grand in that conversation because he didn't know. He plugged his a knowledge gap, which saved him £20,000. You know, that's
Yeah, it's a massive amount of money.
yeah. So you don't know what you don't know until you start talking to people. And networking, like now, I try to do as many social lunches with local investors in our area as we can. So we'll meet up for lunch on a Friday, and every conversation we have, someone is always learning something from that event, because we're all on a different level and we're all tuned into each other, because you're the average of the 5 people you hang around with the most. You know, so if your average is high, it means you're doing well.
For sure. And for people that are like, you know, they want to start going to networking events, they want to broaden their horizons, you know, in the property space or maybe even other spaces, what are like some top tips that you would have for networking, particularly maybe for those that are more introverted?
That's a good point. My business partner's an introvert, but he's a complete expert at everything, you know, to do with finance, strategy, whatever it might be, operations. The first thing I would say is just put yourself out your comfort zone. When you're outside your comfort zone, you grow, and people probably don't understand that. But when you're there and you're nervous and you're not the smartest person in the room, because it's all about levels as well, isn't it? You know, so you know, like for me, I'd want to be in different rooms now because I know a certain amount, you know, and then I want to step up to the next room and the next room. But I think networking, especially our networking event, I can't speak for others, but we have such a variety of people. We have newbies that have zero experience, and then we have ultra net worth individuals that are in the room, you know, and there's synergy there, because you know, the ultra net worth individuals, they are also the ones with the most experience, time and money, you know, and they're always looking to collaborate with other people, so create partnerships within the group. I mean, we're not a property club as such, but it's what you do outside of the meetings. So just put yourself out there, get to the networking event and tell people what you want to do, because things don't happen overnight, Kazy, as you know. It takes a lot of time, resilience and focus to get to, you know, that one level. Then you learn a bit more and you think, oh, that was easy, let's do that again and again and again. And then when you come to a plateau, people in that group have already been there, they've already done it, they've already read the book, got the t-shirt. So it's always worth you having a chat with them to say, look, what did you do when you got to this point? How can I overcome that? And it's like our parents used to always tell us, right? Eat your greens, do this, do that. And you know, you think, what do you know back then? But now in hindsight, you think, bloody, I should have taken their advice back then, you know?
And I think there's some good bits of advice, particularly, you know, around speaking about what you want to do.
Yeah.
Because it means that you can network with more purpose. If you're saying like, look, I'm out here looking for my next rent-to-rent deal, or you know, I want to get into commercial to residential conversions, you're going to have conversations with more purpose as well. You spoke about kind of getting out of your comfort zone. And I guess for me, this is more of a question rather than, you know, I guess there's no right answer. But for somebody who's maybe going to their first or second networking events, maybe doesn't really have like their own tribe in the property space, would you say they should go maybe alone to force them to speak to people? Or do you think it's good to go with somebody as your sort of comfort blanket?
I'm just trying to think back to my first property meet. I went with my dad, and my dad was like my mentor back then, you know. And I think at that age, I'm in my 40s now, you know. I probably started networking a good 15 years ago. I just went for a bit of not security, but a bit of comfort, I suppose. So I knew somebody there, but in hindsight, would have changed it? Probably not. But I can't really answer that one.
I'll tell you why I asked. Like the first time I went with I said the first time or second time, I went with my business partner at the time. Was basically like, look, we need to get ourselves out there more. We're gonna have to commit to go into X amount of networking events, whether it's per month or per year. So the first time we've gone to together. But he's was quite a social butterfly at the time. He's like, we got there. He's like, right, I'm going off to speak to people. I've got to speak to 10. You got to speak to 10. And I was kind of like, all right, I'll try. But I got there in the end, and it's not as daunting as it seems to start with.
No, I think, just from my point of view, I was probably nervous. I went with my dad because my dad was the one who actually got me into the property space in the first place. And I just spoke to people. I went completely open-minded. I only had one buy-to-let property, and I just wanted to know what other people were doing in the space. And having read the books, I got the shiny penny syndrome. I was like, what do you do? Do you do single? Do I carry on doing single lets? What are these HMO things? What are flat developments? What are title splits? I didn't know a lot about them other than what I've already read in the books. But when you speak to people face to face, and where you went to the property meet to speak to 10 people about the number, remember, it's about the quality of the conversation, not just the number. And that's why I say you can't just go to one networking event, because you're not going to tick all the boxes in the first one. You have to build relationships with individuals, and after doing it for a number of months or years, you've got a black book in your phone that are all your property experts. So when you come to and you've got a challenge, you can just ring someone that's already been there and done it, because of the quality of information you have about them. So it's really important that you put in as well as get back out at networking events.
Yeah, no, I think it makes loads of sense, and I think networking is something that's very important, just to broaden your horizons. But I think for a lot of people, and this is something I would say, I remember going with some friends, and there's always people are like, I've only got one property. I'm only an estate agent. But I'm like, don't, if you start selling yourself short before you've even got there and start using the word only before your title, there's going to be people that are aspiring to be an estate agent, are aspiring to have their first property. So there's always going to be, like you said, there's going to be people that are flying and are on their 50th, and those that actually want to learn from you. So I think, look, it's really good. You mentioned going to different events. Where do you actually advertise? How would people be able to find
what the Kent property meet?
The Kent property.
So me and Chrissy, we're the founders of the Kent property meet. We're a bit slow on the social media thing.
Do you use Everbright and stuff?
Eventbrite, we use Eventbrite. We're on Facebook and Instagram and things, but now it's all been systemized. We've got people that are doing it for us, but we're on the usual stuff. We're on LinkedIn, for example, and we've only ever been for the last few years at one venue. I mean, we used to change the venues quite often. Now we're known to be at the Great Danes Hotel in Maidstone, which is opposite Leeds Castle in Kent. I know it's confusing, but Leeds Castle is actually in Kent. So we're on the M20, and it's a pretty central location geographically. So if you're coming down from Greenwich, Dartford, Medway Town, Sittingbourne, all the way to Ramsgate or Thanet, Dover area, we're pretty central. We're only sort of half an hour, 40 minutes for everyone to meet in the middle. So geographically, Maidstone's a very, very good location.
That's good stuff. I mean, with stuff like Eventbrite, with stuff like, Facebook, LinkedIn, you can, if you want to go to an event every week for the next year, you type in property, there's going to be something going on. And I think you just got to find what works for you in a lot of places. Find a place that you feel comfortable. And I think you touched on as well the quality of the conversations that you had, sort of network with purpose. I am a registered, I hold my hand up, I've got the card and the certificate, I'm a rubbish networker. I talk to people that want to talk to me, and I don't go out of my way to be okay, you know what, I need to make a beeline for this person because they're the VP at Lloyd's and we want sponsorship for the podcast, for example, or something like that. So you do have to, don't be like me, be like Jazz and network with purpose as well. What would you say is one of the best connections you've made through running a networking event or just networking yourself?
It's not just one, Kazy. Every single individual in that meet that comes and on a regular basis adds value to it. So it's not just one person. From my own personal perspective, I have a reason of why I do property, and I've worked back from it, and it changes every year. For my short-term goals, my medium-term goals, every 3 years it changes, but my ultimate 5 to 10 year goals is why I'm doing it, and I backtrack to why I'm doing it. And all I'm trying to do is, that's my business plan, is who can I use or who can I leverage their knowledge to get to that in a more smoother way. And I'll give you an example. my plate is full with refurbs. I mean, I've been stressed out to the maximum, you know. That's outside of my family life. I've got 3 little kids, lovely wife, you know, and all that. But from a work point of view, and you know, Kazy, this isn't a 9 to 5 job. This is a 9 to whenever. In fact, you know, I manage all my own portfolio. You know, I'll get messages at 1 o'clock in the morning saying, "Oh, the shower door's broken" or whatever. You know, and you think, "What am I going to do at 1 o'clock in the morning?" Yeah, but sorry, I've lost my chain of thought now.
I was just basically saying, what is some of the biggest wins you've had from for attending or arranging?
Yeah, so with the developments being all stressed, not all stressed, but you know, like work pressure. I've now, rather than using my own build team, because I've built my own, I've got 4 guys that work for us full time, me and my business partner. So any in-house refurb projects or anything like that, they deal with, no problem.
So multi-trades do a lot of...
Yeah, so we've got like a multi-trade carpenter, we've got a bricklayer, and we've got a labourer that works for us, and they pretty much take care of everything. But doing the flat developments, which I'm doing now, so I've got one project which is 6 flats and a commercial, and another one 9 flats and a commercial. I've shipped it out to somebody to do it on proper JCT contracts with the contract administrator in place, CDM designs, etc., etc. You know, I've used a project manager just because I just want to be hands off. And I just thought to myself, you know, I've got my bag has been HMOs. I can manage those, not a problem. But with the flats, I don't want somebody ringing me every 5 minutes to say, "Where do you want this? How's this going to go? There's a problem here. We found this out." I just want to ship it out and say, "Look, I'm going to give you a set of keys at the beginning. And with the 6 flats and the commercial, I just want 7 sets of keys at the end. That's it." You know, so I've met that. I've met the person who's PMing that through the networking event. You know, so we already have a relationship, and had I not, it would just be a challenge to find the right person. It could take me an extra 4 weeks or 6 weeks. So the people are just on tap, and that's through the quality of the conversation.
Because people that kind of know who you are, they know to a degree how you operate, they know like what your values are, and it makes it a lot easier to find. I think I found the same thing, like through slightly different mediums, but through social media. I found a great EA, a great social media manager, like good build teams, but it's because I guess you attract what you're putting out there, so people see that I know what Jazz is like. I know he's pretty straightforward. I know he's laid back, but I also know he knows his stuff, so can't sort of give him, you know, rubbish results. Obviously, you've spoken about quite a few different strategies. You've spoken about refurbs, HMOs, residential conversions. Now, at the moment, like going into the residential conversion space, how would you say that differs from your sort of more standard just refurbs or even the HMOs that you were more known for?
It's just knowledge, Kazy, you know. It's all it's a plan from a strategy point of view at the beginning. Why are you doing it? What's the purpose of this? What's the net return of this project? And then it's just steps to get to that. You know, even with the HMO, when we plan a HMO refurb, we have the floor plans done, we have the technical designs, we know what the end GDV is going to be roughly, you know, and we know that because in our networking group we share our valuation reports with each other because we have relationships to do that. Whether that's allowed or not, I don't know, but you know, we share information.
I mean, I think they're your valuation reports. You've paid for them, so I don't think there's any reason why you wouldn't be able to do that.
As I'm growing up in the property space now, I'm trying to leverage that out because ultimately one of my reasons for doing property is to get my time back, and it sounds counterproductive. You know, you're managing a growing portfolio and you're trying to get your time back, but ultimately this comes down to being a people person, you know, and the more relationships you have, and going back to your point that you picked up on that you're not comfortable or you don't very network as well as you could. Even doing the podcast, at least you're still putting yourself out there.
Listen, I always say these podcasts are borderline, like they're partly like my therapy. Because I sit down and I'm like, the builder drove you crazy too. The solicitor wound you up as well. At least somebody else is going through it. But also it's a way for me. I get to sit down with great people that are doing great things, get to share insight, and we all get to learn from each other. I think, you know, always, because we've got like watchers and listeners that are at different stages of their journey. And I think when we talk about things, like we're very quickly throwing all the acronyms, everything's LTV, BMV, BRR, but like let's kind of get into some nuts and bolts of some of the strategies that you're currently working on. So with your residential conversion, so for those that are not familiar, it's, when you're buying an existing residential unit and splitting into self-contained dwellings, so it means it's going to need full planning. Do you generally buy them with planning, or do you buy the unit subject to planning, or are you buying them unconditional?
It just depends on the deal. I mean, when part of the negotiation is if you can obviously delay the completion and get planning and not have to fork out the money, that's great. Ultimately, I always look at the bottom line is what's the cost of finance, which a lot of people forget. At the moment where we are, middle of 2025, interest rates have just dropped to 4.25%. So the idea is, can I use that money somewhere else that's going to earn me more than 4.25%? And if it's not, then so it's where you deploy that money. So ultimately that, and depending on what the vendor wants as well. So as part of the negotiation, some people aren't desperate to sell, but given some of the accidental landlords that have come into the marketplace or had like inheritance from previous, they have no clue about the effect of Section 24. Because a lot of properties are still owned in people's personal names, and
for those that are not familiar, again, just let people know what Section 24 is.
So Section 24 basically means if you own something in your personal name, the interest that you pay on your mortgage, you can't claim that as an expense.
It's no longer
so it's a turnover tax. Which is,
for a lot of people now, they're in a place where actually they're having income and it's costing them more money to own a property. Than it makes them. So effectively it's a loss leader from a yield perspective. Sometimes it's topped up from capital appreciation.
Well, I mean, say for example you're working uptown and you've got a good job that's earning you over 40,000 a year, right? So it's costing you having that asset, but you only realise a year later once you've done your tax return, because you get your PAYE slip coming in, which is fine, that's from your employment. But then when you look at your investments or anything else, you're going to do that with your accountant at the end of the year. By then you think, wow, I thought I had this, but actually I've got this because I can't offset that cost.
So like, to look at it in sort of layman's terms, now that if you're already in like the 40% tax bracket, now if previously you were getting £1,000 of rental income and 800 of it was the interest element on your mortgage, you're making £200 profits. You pay your tax of 40% on the £200. Whereas now, subject to like some deductions that you can make, effectively you're paying the tax on the whole £1,000. So if you make £12,000 a year, you're paying 40% tax. So for a lot of people, I guess it hasn't become as viable to hold properties in their own names. And it just goes to the importance of, obviously think this is like, regulation, it changed, but it's the importance of going to networking events, watching podcasts, making sure that you're in the right groups, that you're aware of what's happening and what's going to happen so that you're best prepared. Your recent deal, so let's talk about the 9 flats one. Did you buy that one subject to planning or with planning?
No, that one is legacy, so that's through our family portfolio that we've got. So
that's you own the asset already?
Already owned, yeah.
And so you then work the planning as an asset that you already own?
That's right, yeah.
So what was it previously?
So it was 2 shops already in an 8-bedroom HMO above. And a car park on the side. We bought the car park so we could expand the scheme into the car park and go up using airspace. I'd gone in initially at 15 flats, and I hit the social housing number after 10 in our local area. The planner wasn't keen on it, so I dropped it down to 12. And it was just the way that it worked out. I had to ultimately reduce it down to 9 in the end. But I did go in for a planning appeal, and I lost that appeal. And it's taken me quite a few years to get to that point. And I could go in for another appeal because then they refused the appeal on just a cat slide roof, so it's a design element, nothing to do with anything else. But I just want to get it out.
And that's the thing. When you own an asset, you've got more flexibility. And that's one of the good things that when people talk about generational wealth, like, if somebody's owned an asset before, the next generation can sometimes work and improve on that asset to improve its profitability. So you've gone in for full planning, initially looking at 16 flats. So 15, you said 15 flats. So you initially was to extend out onto the side with, I guess, like an element of kind of new build to the side.
That's right.
And then do an airspace development to go up into the loft. You mentioned, obviously, the affordable housing element. So, again, for those that are not familiar, when you go over 9 units, there's now a requirement for, affordable housing, Section 106. So, I guess it may sometimes make more sense to actually stay underneath that, because then you can maximize the value of the assets that you're selling if you're doing everything
Yeah.
to the open market, to the public market as well. Was there a substantial seal bill on?
Not on this project. It was more about the time, the cost of the time, rather than the seal. We had a small Section 106 on there, but the community infrastructure levy. Actually, there might have been. It was very small. It was like 500 quid or something towards the library books, or
Okay,
yeah. It
that's
wasn't.
good.
It wasn't a lot in that area, but
That's good. Like Croydon, I think I just paid 56,000 or something
Really?
on my seal. Yeah, for 4 flats.
yeah, I remember reading something about the books in the local library and the planning, but that was like 2-3 years ago. From my point of view, the reason why I wanted to get on with it now rather than do another planning application or appeal is because planning is just getting made easier, I think. So I thought the way I've structured the deal with the structural engineer and the architect is that let's get this built for now, and if in the future I want to go up another level, let's do the structure so that I can just take the roof off and put another floor on there.
Yeah, so make sure that, and that's the thing about fit for purpose. We visited a site over in Croydon, actually, above on that sort of the main Brighton Road. It was a friend of ours, and same thing, they got planning for 9 units, but again, it's preparing for the future. So foundations, all of the way that the beams were in the loft flat for where their plant room was, gave them scope to do another 2 units in the airspace in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you another example. I bought property in Chatham, which was a old townhouse on basement, first, second, and third, and then in the loft there was like a dormer, and I split that into 3 flats. But I used it as an 8-bedroom HMO across the 3 flats. So it's a multi-unit block, as it's known, for mortgage purposes. I bought that about 7-8 years ago. It was one of my first ones that I bought around 300k mark. And then over the years, I refinanced it once, brought my leverage down, because I try to keep my leverage below the sort of 65% loan to value mark, just so that my portfolio is weathered in downturns. And then about 2 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, I applied for planning permission to extend the bottom flat. So similar to what you do, with the ground floor flat. And I managed to go out 8 meters out the back on a semi-detached property through full planning. And I turned that property into it's still 3 flats, but it's used as a 10-bedroom HMO, and it's GDV'd up at over £1 million, and you think, so it's legacy stock, and I've gone back to visit it again rather than, because I couldn't find a deal that time, and I wasn't actively looking, because I've actually only ever bought 1 property through an estate agent. Everything else has been direct to vendor through relationships. People know what I do, and this is all through networking. So this is how powerful it is. Deals actually get bought to you that aren't even on the market.
That's interesting. So a lot of people in this market are really struggling to find their next deal, because there's a disconnect between what vendors want, what their expectations are, versus what as buyers, I guess we want to pay when we're on that side of the table. In terms of differing skill sets, like a lot of people will hear you talking about, I converted this house into flats, I turned this one into a HMO, I did this, that, airspace developments. What would you say is your favorite type of project to do?
The simpler ones.
And what goes in a simple bag for you? Where does that sit?
I think in the past, it's always been the vanilla buy-to-lets are just simple and straightforward, but they don't give you a massive cash flow. For me, cash flow is king, like any business. When you've got cash flow coming in, you can pay off mortgages and bring your leverage down, which is very important in today's day and age. HMOs, I've become an expert at them. I call them suites because of my hospitality background, but I offer a lot more than what anyone else does in my area. My rooms are big. They have like a tea point or pot noodle station, not quite a kitchen, with an ensuite, but it's all customer service as well. They have direct contact with me. My wife's just joined the business as well, so we're running it as a husband and wife team. I have a business partner. We also have properties that we own together, but ultimately it's always about people. the HMOs for me I've just found them to just be easy, even though I call a HMO a high maintenance operation, which it is,
Yeah.
Another acronym you can add.
That's a nice one.
It definitely is a high maintenance operation, but when you're dealing with individuals, whether it be the build team, your consultants, or the end user, which are your tenants ultimately, as long as you treat everyone with respect, they treat you with respect back, and it just makes the whole process more pleasant.
It's really interesting, and that's the thing I find interesting about property. Like, there's so many different strategies, and you're saying, at the moment you're kind of preferring the HMO model. For me personally, like, if I could get rid of one, it would be the HMO model, because it's like, Sandra has decided she doesn't like Rebecca. Rebecca's decided that this person doesn't clean the bath in the way that she liked it. It's a lot, and I personally really like the flat conversions because of what you mentioned earlier, the amount that you can outsource and be like, right, big mains contractor, JCT contract, you're dealing at project manager, deal with all of the utilities, all of the structural defects warranties, all of the building control liaison. And I need a lot less involvement, because you can have a complete stage 4 like architectural plans of all of your like mechanicals and electricals and everything outlined. But I think it just goes to show that there's no such thing as like a one size fits all right strategy.
There isn't. But going back to your point about you liking the flats, to get to that point, to have enough deposit for the flats, I bet it's the HMOs that are cash flowing that deposit.
For me, probably my flips, so by, like you said, that the 1 to 2 bedroom strategy.
Yeah.
But the HMOs, whilst they didn't give me the deposit, like, I don't know if you know this, but before I was buying properties, I had a rent to rent business, and we had about 50 properties, mainly in like the Greenwich borough.
Yeah.
So that's like 300 odd rooms, and that's like, cash flow in 7 figures a year.
Yeah.
Obviously that's your revenue, and then obviously you got profits as part of that. But that, I think, having a cash flow in business alongside a business that you get the lump sums of capital is what keeps you going. That's the lifeblood, like, because it's all well and good flipping properties and you can make 50, 100, 200,000 pounds a year. But if you have to live off that money as well, you're constantly reducing your working capital amount. So I think it's, people ask me, what should I do? I'm like, if possible, like, for me, the best thing is to try and run 2 horses, have something that's giving you the cash flow and a lifeblood, and then something that's also allowing you to grow your working capital.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, HMOs for cash flow are brilliant,
Amazing.
And providing you don't have lifestyle inflation, which we were talking about before the podcast, I think your war chest builds up very quickly with that cash flow, providing you do sensible things with it. And at that point, Kazy, I'm now making money through efficiency savings. So with the introduction of tech, so not just relying on the accountant to give me my P&L, so using software, systemizing the business now, so you can keep your finger on the pulse. I'll give you an example of running away from an efficiency point of view. I built a brand new built, bought a pub in Kent, demolished it, dug out a basement for a big communal area, which would cost the earth, literally cost the earth. And then I built 13 micro studios on it. My gas bill for 6 months on that property, because no one had their finger on the pulse, and ultimately I'm to blame, was 26 grand.
Yeah. I've had a couple of interesting messages from British Gas across the years.
And ultimately, I let that one slip because I had so much going on elsewhere. But now, we've put in electronic thermostats, humidity sensors, so we know exactly what's going on, and changed all the meters to the smart meters. So, every single week we can log in and see what the usage is, especially like with the weather now getting better. So we just turn everything down 1 degree a week, and see where it ends up.
And I think that's what's so important. Like, we can touch on it when we talk about like networking, and it's like, you don't have to do it. When people say, oh, do I have to network, or do I have to be on social media? No, you don't. But if everybody else is doing it, you become less competitive. And it's the same with the implementation of tech. You don't have to be using Hive or Smart Heating or all these things. You don't have to be using Xero or QuickBooks. But if you don't and everybody else is, you become a lot less competitive. Yeah,
well, you become a dinosaur, don't you?
You let your
business, you let your business just run away for no reason, and you've got to keep a rein on what you've built.
Yeah, so we're currently in the transition, like for the PBK community and just like my team, we're currently to my I'm not happy about it, but we're transitioning over to start using Slack because it's like, it's great to have all these conversations on WhatsApp. It's very convenient. It's where you speak to friends and family. So it's all, you're always going to be there. But also you start to lose messages in conversations when you're having 5 different conversations at once. You end up with 12 different WhatsApp groups with the same people. So I think implementing tech and systems for me has been a massive saver in actually being able to scale business. So you obviously, what have you actually used yourself? Like, what are some things that you would advise people use in terms of systems?
I use Monday.com, which is like an organisation thing. I use 2 diaries. I've got the iPhone one, although others are available. And my wife likes to use the Outlook one because of the email systems. They're the 3 main things. And then software-wise, any accounting software, whether it be the ones that you mentioned, or a dedicated one for property. At the end of the day, I'll just want to know. I want to have the fingers on the pulse, I want to make sure that I know at any given time where we are, the bottom line, so that if a deal does come up, I know where to shift funds from, so that we can proceed with the next thing.
And that's the reality of it. It's not like having software or tech or even eat and breathe in your business are going to stop you having problems, but you want to be able to see those problems really early on so you can meet them, because the difference of, like you said, 6 months of not being on top of a gas bill might be close to £30,000.
Yeah, you've wiped your profit out, if you're not careful.
Exactly that. How much, bearing in mind you bought your first property in 2008 and we're now 2025, what are some of the biggest changes you think you've seen in the market?
I think just the working environment, the tax liabilities, the availability of the kind of deals that you want to do. We've got this massive thing called the Renters' Rights Bill, which is coming in. And I know from our communication with people in our group, anyone with a single let is like, there's no point me having this single let anymore, because I don't have a guarantor, for example, with that tenant. Or it might be a bit tired, and they might want to change the caliber of person that they're dealing with in that property. It depends on what it is. I think just the political environment is definitely more anti-landlord, I think. I think the challenges are, and they're always external forces, aren't they, Kazy? Like as an investor, and you're focused on providing a solution or finding a solution for everything. So our mindset or my mindset is always like, let's find the good in this. Let's stay in high spirits. Let's find the positive in this. Let's try helping other people, because then you help yourself ultimately, don't you? But
I think that's what's quite interesting is, like you mentioned, there's a lot of accidental landlords, people that own their own properties in their own names. They're seeing, the changes in taxation. They're seeing the Renters' Right Bill. They're seeing a lot of changes in terms of legislation and how profitable property can be. But the flip side to that is it presents a lot of opportunities as people are exiting the market, that maybe have had enough and are happy to, I think there's periods when the market is really strong and things like, for example, lease option agreements don't really work. Because I'm like, I could just sell it. Why would I wait 5 years to sell it? But now in a market where, it's more of a buyer's market, lease options may be something that people can start to kind of attack more aggressively again, which means there's more opportunities for those with less funds to actually be able to start to negotiate deals that work for them and work for existing landlords as well, which I think is a sort of silver lining.
Yeah, I think when you said it's a buyer's market, it depends what market you're actually going for, Kazy. Like where I am now, I've got plenty of residential properties, getting older as well, I'm thinking, what about my pension? What about the tax savings? So I'm starting to look at.
This episode of the podcast is sponsored by the PBK community. Now, if you're serious about starting or scaling your property portfolio, but you're feeling stuck or feeling like you're running in circles, trust me, I've been there. But listen, you don't have to go it alone. That's why I put together the PBK community, a space where you get real support, build real connections, and yield real results. Now, we're talking direct access to my power team like lawyers, brokers, architects, and so much more. Bi-weekly Zoom calls with industry pros and template contracts and bespoke tools to make sure you're not wasting time on the wrong moves. And exclusive property deals sourced specifically for members' needs. No fluff, no gimmicks, just support and resources you actually need to level up your property game. This isn't another networking group. It's an elite membership designed for property entrepreneurs who want to be on the inside. We're talking proven systems to streamline your operations, expert-led training to help you work smarter and faster, and a community of like-minded investors. So if you're tired of trying to do it all on your own and you're ready to start implementing the right systems right now, let's book a call with me and my team to chat about how we can make it happen. The link will be in the bio. Now back to the video.
More commercial properties. Commercial and residential are completely different.
Yeah.
You know, the same principles in terms of strategies apply. So you can still have like a commercial property in multiple occupation. You can still do delayed completions on commercial properties, etc. But I'm looking at more going down the commercial route now.
Nice. It's commercial is very much like your keys, your problem once it's handed over.
Yeah, once you've got an FRI lease out, fully repairing and insuring lease. Yeah, but again, it depends on the covenant. If it's a mum and pop business, you're trying to support them. You know, if after a year they've gone pop and they've moved out, there's not a lot you can do about it. You know?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, like anything, you can always, people can have personal guarantees outside of it. But what I mean is that unlike my boiler's gone, there's X, Y, Z happened. You know, it's just like, look, it's very, commercial units are much more like standardized investment vehicles. This is the property, this is the income. Yes, businesses could go bust, but from a repairs perspective or from almost like a customer service perspective, there's a lot less you have to do.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, you know, bearing in mind you've built a sizable property portfolio, that you still self-manage your entire portfolio. Why is it that you put yourself through that, sir?
I enjoy it, Kazy. You know, my background is pub trade, you know, and I run 2 pubs. I was 21 when I got into the pub, literally just finished university, had a degree, and I went straight into the pub trade. And it's all about talking to people, you know. It's always been about people, and I've built my whole business around people, you know, and I actually like a lot of my customers, you know. Actually, I like all of them, not a lot. I like every single one. You know, we have. I don't really hear a lot from people, to be honest. Like I mentioned that shower text that I got at 1 o'clock in the morning. That was a tenant that just moved in. You know, which had just moved in. But then, you know, once you've done like the induction with people and done like a wine and cheese welcoming, which I tend to do in the houses as well, you know, buy a bottle of wine, leave some cheese there, and just say, look, you know, Kazy's moving in on Friday. Help yourselves, guys. You know, I might pop in for 10 minutes. Because if you get the foundations right, you actually never hear from people, you know. And I will make sure the property's heated, insured, maintenance is done. All you need to do is the easy part, which is pay the rent on the first of the month or whenever it's due, you know. And that way it just keeps everything clean cut, and there's never any drama. And all of the properties I have, I invest in them. I don't cut any corners because I don't want my children thinking, why did dad not do this properly? Why did he just do a sticking plaster job on this repair or whatever it might be, you know? So if you give a good product, you tend to find a better covenant of customer.
And I think that's very true. Like the better properties are always the less stressful ones. The ones that maybe you're planning to develop in the future, you've maybe not done as much work to, are the ones that you tend to have. Can't say I like all of my tenants. I say I want to say 94% of them.
Really?
Yeah, there's a couple that, like, you know,
push your boundaries.
There's one tenant in particular who's contacted me more in the time. I'm going to say they, to not give you away who they are. They have been a tenant than every other tenant combined.
Wow.
From a case of like, so I got to a point where I just said, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I still want to technically self-manage, but we now have 2 property managers that are based over in the Philippines. They manage the entire portfolio. They are the direct point of contact. I've taken emails off my phone. I don't want to be in a restaurant at 10 p.m. at night and see an email that ruins my whole mood. So, but I still want to make sure the tenants get that level of customer service where if there's an issue, they're going to be heard, and they're going to be heard within ideally minutes, worst case a couple of hours, as opposed to myself who ideally I'd be skiing somewhere.
You've taken me back to something. I mean, I employed a property manager a few years ago with my business partner, and what we found was the issues, because we keep a spreadsheet for mostly everything. The issues were getting more and more petty, but someone using someone's toothpaste and eggs, and on one side we're trying to deal with like £1 million refurb on this side, and then we're getting a text message coming in about toothpaste and things. But this was a property manager. I don't think they were as invested as we were, and perhaps it was our downfall because we didn't train them well enough. But every tenant, touch wood, that I have put in, or my business partners put into our property, we never hear nothing. I mean, the two common things is the Wi-Fi's gone down and the shower's leaking if it's a HMO, right?
I don't know how they make. I feel like they make them bad on purpose, like because there's no even upside. Like the shower, I don't know if it's just.
Well, so the shower leaking, any shower that was tiled, we've got rid of the tiles now, and we've used like the shower walls,
the board, the
board system, and it's just mastic line. And if you look at your insurance policies, by the way, you're meant to remastic those every year on some policies. So I actually get a mastic guy to do every single HMO property every year, regardless, and they charge like £5 a metre. But if you don't get any calls for showers, brilliant. This year I've had one, and where are we now? We're in May. I've had one call. That's not bad going.
I've had a few.
I've had one.
I had a few. It's just random though, because I've got some stock that's got quite a bit older, but it can be stressful. But I think that's the thing, is you got to find what works for you. And like I said, we've had in the previous business where they were sort of managing 300 tenants, had property managers based in the UK on like good salaries because they've got a lot of experience, had people that were brand new that we thought we'd really train from the ground up. But I think you're very right. You have to hire for attitude rather than maybe experience, because if you don't, you'll find your repairs will skyrocket, because they'll be like, there was one time the lock was just broken. They weren't locked out, but they called a locksmith that charged like £450 to fit a Yale lock, just because of lack of experience and understanding that actually that's not an emergency. No one's locked out. The door, like, they still have access. But it's just finding that balance. So look, you've done loads of stuff in the property space, HMOs, commercial conversions, residential conversions. You've liked some bits, you haven't liked other bits as much. Going forward for you, for the next sort of like 5 years, where do you think your focus is going to be?
I've been very clear on this. When my wife was from a banking professional, and she's quit work about a year and a half ago. And since she's joined, I've said to her, look, once we've got 17 projects on at the moment. Once they're finished, we're taking 6 months off. Not off from the business, but I'm just going to build the war chest up, sit on my hands, and then I'm going to systemize what we're doing like fully. Because there will be a point where I do need to employ another property manager at some point, because we'll be making more and acquiring more assets. But when we get to that point, I think we're going to have to make money via the savings, and we can only do that if we actually pause. So I think it's about stopping, because most businesses, Kazy, they actually go under when they're expanding and through lack of cash flow. So I don't want to get to that point. I just want to stop, and then sort of, we're going to the next level up, and maybe I have to sit in a different room with different people as well, and not be the smartest person in that room, so I know what the next step up is. And then at some point I probably will just stop altogether at some point, because when's enough? I've always said that I don't want to ever be uber wealthy or uber busy or anything. I've got young kids that are growing up, and I think from my legacy point of view, I want to leave them something, but I don't want them to go and spend it all, because in being from an Indian background, we have this saying about money only lasts 3 generations. And I'm the 3rd generation from my granddad. So I want to make sure that I'm leaving something to the next generation, and that, my kids are in good habits, not in bad habits. They understand the value of money. I remember growing up, my first job was like strawberry picking, because my granddad used to take a gang of workers to our local farms, and we used to like pick strawberries and pull the weeds out of the farm and all that sort of thing. So I understand the value of earning 70p back then, you know, or a pound an hour or whatever it was.
You're going to make sure you pass that.
I want to pass that on. You know, I want my children to start at the bottom so that they know that, you know, when you go out and spend £10 on, you know, what I mean, a Happy Meal nowadays is like £7, I think, six quid or something.
Cheeky Nando's for two people is about £35 at the moment.
It's ridiculous, you know. You just go out for lunch, it's like 30 quid. But I want them to understand that to earn that money, it takes this amount of effort. So that's where I want to go ultimately, is going to be legacy planning, not so much buying more assets.
Amazing. Well, we really appreciate having you on today. For people that want to connect, potentially even maybe come down to the Kent Property Meet, how can they get in touch with you?
So the first one is for free, and we have also a WhatsApp group. We carry the conversation on through the WhatsApp group, but all the usual socials, Facebook, Kent Property Meet, Instagram, Kent Property Meet. You can follow me personally, Jazz Doklu, send me a friend request. You can look me up. We're on LinkedIn. Also look up Chrissy Kusic, who is my co-host at the Kent Property Meet. You can follow us both. And I'm sure you put a link in the description somewhere as well. And it's been a pleasure, Kazy. Thank you for having me on.
I really appreciate having you on. I'm going to make sure that I go down to Kent, because that was actually where Rochester was where my dad's first ever house was when he moved from Nigeria to the UK. So I definitely need to get back down there, you know, go and trace some roots. So I'm going to check it out. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel so we can bring you the biggest and the best guests each and every week. That has been another episode of the PBK podcast. Catch you next week. Peace.